Chapter 1693. After getting Di Beichen's answer, Yu Linfeng was also a little surprised. Previously, when he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was known as the miracle doctor in Fengbo country, he didn't know that Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain talent in medical skills. Now that he knew that Di Beichen's leg was cured by Bailey Hongzhuang, Yu Linfeng knew how outstanding Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were. As the young sect leader of Tiangang sect, Di Beichen suddenly suffered from a leg disease. Needless to say, he must have visited all the famous doctors. However, even after visiting all the famous doctors, Di Beichen's leg disease was still not cured. It was under such circumstances that Di Beichen was forced to leave Tiangang sect. 3 years ago, Bailey Hongzhuang was only 14 or 15 years old, and she was able to make Di Beichen stand up again. Then Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were really too amazing. Not only that, according to the information that Gu Taihong found, the more Yu Linfeng saw, the more surprised he was. During the inter-school competition, Bailey Hongzhuang won first place in the face competition. Although the 3 great academies weren't famous in their eyes, the alchemy competition that they held wouldn't be very powerful. However, since Bailey Hongzhuang was able to win first place in the alchemy competition, presumably her attainments in alchemy wouldn't be bad. Bailey Hongzhuang was only young, and not only was her cultivation talent outstanding, but she was also proficient in medical skills and alchemy. Adding all these aspects together, Bailey Hongzhuang was already outstanding enough. Even some of the outstanding children of the aristocratic families couldn't be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, because alchemists and doctors were very outstanding professions. When Gu Taihong reported this information to him, he and Gu Taihong were both surprised. However, this wasn't the end. As they learned more and more information, the surprise in their hearts became more and more intense. This was because they also learned that Bailey Hongzhuang had another identity besides being a cultivator, an alchemist and a doctor, an inscription master. An inscription master was a rarer profession than an alchemist and a doctor, and the requirements were very high. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments in inscription were also very outstanding. This was also reflected in the inter-school tournament. The inscription masters of the Qing dynasty praised Bailey Hongzhuang, and even felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was the real master. Among these identities, as long as a cultivator had one of these identities, it was already a very powerful person. However, Bailey Hongzhuang actually had all 3. Not only that, but Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments in these 3 areas were also very outstanding, which was a bit shocking. Yu Linfeng and Gu Taihong were both experienced and knowledgeable people. They had seen a lot of strange things, but it was the first time they had seen a situation like Bailey Hongzhuang. After understanding all this, Yu Linfeng and Gu Taihong could almost conclude that there must be a secret behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Otherwise, it was impossible for a young lady of the Qing dynasty general's mansion to have the opportunity to come into contact with these. As for how Bailey Hongzhuang came into contact with these, Yu Linfeng didn't care. He was more amazed by Bailey Hongzhuang's talent and potential in these aspects. As everyone knew, it took a lot of talent to become an alchemist. If there was no talent, there was no opportunity to enter this profession. The requirements for an inscription master were even more stringent, and it could be said that 1 in 10,000 was chosen. Chapter 1694. No one could find fault with such a Bailey Hongzhuang. Because, whether it was in an aristocratic family or in a sect, such a Bailey Hongzhuang was an extremely outstanding existence. Although in many people's opinion, if a cultivator wholeheartedly walked the path of a cultivator, they would be able to go further. However, according to their current situation, this was clearly not a problem for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang had already used her actions to prove all of this. Her cultivation was not weaker than the outstanding cultivators of her age. From Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, Yu Linfeng could conclude that Bailey Hongzhuang's main focus was on cultivation. Revenge and saving her parents were the things that Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to do the most. Yu Linfeng slowly collected his thoughts. This time, he only felt that choosing a disciple in the assessment competition was a very wise decision. He had found such a precious disciple, so he must nurture her well in the future. Then you might just be grateful. Yu Linfeng slowly said. He could imagine the usually high-spirited Di Beichen suddenly becoming a cripple. He had nowhere to vent the despair and helplessness in his heart. Until Bailey Hongzhuang healed his legs, he was able to stand up again. Naturally, he was endlessly grateful to Bailey Hongzhuang. Many people would treat this kind of gratitude as feelings, but the end result was usually very bad. Hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Di Beichen's eyes became firm and serious. I am very clear about my feelings. I am grateful to Hongzhuang, but more than that, it is love. I don't think I will be wrong about this. Just like when he expressed his feelings to Hong Zhuang also suspected that he was just grateful. Only he knew that his feelings for Hong Zhuang were never just gratitude. Because long before Hong Zhuang healed his legs, he must have had feelings for Hong Zhuang. Looking at Di Beichen's confident look, Yu Linfeng nodded slightly. It seemed that he didn't need to worry about this. You already know about Hong Zhuang's background, right? Yu Linfeng's gaze landed on Di Beichen. His jade-like gentle eyes were filled with a trace of sharpness. Di Beichen nodded slightly. I know. In fact, Di Beichen was also a little surprised. He did not know how Yu Linfeng found out about this matter. At the same time, he did not understand why Yu Linfeng would choose to hand Limitless Palace over to Hong Zhuang after finding out about this matter. Logically speaking, any sect leader would look for a powerful cultivator with a good character when choosing a successor. Moreover, this cultivator would not cause any trouble. Hong Zhuang did not have any problems in other aspects, but her background was undoubtedly a huge problem. Hong Zhuang was destined to rescue her parents and take revenge. Once she became the young palace master of Limitless Palace, then Limitless Palace would be linked to her. When the Yu clan and Lan clan became enemies, Limitless Palace would naturally be involved. If it was anyone else, they would not want the sect that they had supported to be involved in this kind of matter. No matter how good Hong Zhuang's innate talent was, Yu Linfeng would not choose her. However, Yu Linfeng's reaction was unexpected. Not only did he choose Hong Zhuang, he was also unusually firm without any hesitation. This was a little too strange. Chapter 1695. Di Beichen kept pondering, but in the end he did not voice his doubts. Then what do you plan to do? Yu Linfeng continued. The most important thing now was to rescue Bailey Hong Zhuang's parents. As for the other matters, they could take their time to think about it. The longer Lan Yunxiao and his wife stayed in the Yu clan, the greater the danger. Seeing that Yu Linfeng was so concerned about Hong Zhuang's parents, Di Beichen was even more puzzled. Why was he doing this? As if he could see Di Beichen's anger, Yu Linfeng was not surprised. Thinking about it, anyone who saw him being so concerned about Hong Zhuang's parents would also find it strange. Since Hong Zhuang is my disciple, I naturally want her to be well. If you think of a way and need my help, you can tell me. Yu Linfeng's expression was indifferent and calm. His pair of gentle eyes were filled with concern and sincerity. He and Bailey Hong Zhuang felt like old friends at first sight, so he was very satisfied with this disciple of his. Only after rescuing Bailey Hong Zhuang's parents would Hong Zhuang be able to do other things with peace of mind. Otherwise, it would not be good if there was always one thing hanging in the air. Following Yu Linfeng's Hua Yun, Di Beichen's deep eyes flashed with a trace of light. Yu Linfeng's heartfelt words surprised him, but he understood even more clearly that Yu Linfeng thought highly of Bailey Hong Zhuang. This was the elder's concern for the younger generation. Just like how Situ Yen had always taken care of him, Yu Linfeng also treated Bailey Hong Zhuang the same way. Thinking of this, Di Beichen immediately bowed to Yu Linfeng. Thank you, Palace Master Yu. I will think of a way to rescue Hong Zhuang's parents as soon as possible. This matter had always been on his mind. As long as this matter was not resolved, his heart would not be at ease. However, he was still waiting for news from the Shirtian Pavilion. Only when he knew the exact location of Hong Zhuang's parents could he take action. At this moment, Di Beichen suddenly recalled a secret. It was said that the Limitless Palace Master had always hated the cultivators from the Lan clan. So far, the Limitless Palace had never had any contact with the Lan clan. None of the Lan clan's cultivators had ever appeared in Limitless Palace. Although there was no concrete evidence, many people had spread such rumors. Could it be that there was a grudge between Palace Master Yu and the Lan family? If that was the case, Di Beichen felt that it was understandable why Yu Linfeng would help Hong Zhuang. Seeing this, Yu Linfeng also nodded. Do you have any news now? Currently, we are still unable to determine where Hong Zhuang's parents are being held by the Yu clan. They have done this matter very secretly. I have already sent people to investigate for a long time, but they have not found anything. Yu Linfeng narrowed his eyes. The Yu clan is a big family. I think that this matter would not be known by everyone in the Yu clan. Only Yu Manlan and the other Yu clan disciples would know about it. If such an important matter was exposed, it would be a huge blow to the Yu clan. Therefore, they would definitely do it very secretly. Why don't I go and ask around? I have already asked the people from the Shirtian Pavilion to help me ask around. I believe that there will be results after a while. Di Beichen said slowly. It was not that he had no way to find out this information, but he was afraid that the situation might change if he made a big move. Chapter 1696. Did Shirtian Tower accept this mission? Yu Linfeng asked. They will accept it. Di Beichen's tone was firm. If he was still worried about whether Shirtian Tower would accept this mission, after knowing that Mo Yunjue was the young master of Shirtian Tower, he was already certain of the answer. He and Mo Yunjue had only met twice, but just from the process of his dealings with Mo Yunjue, he could already conclude that Mo Yunjue was a very powerful person. They were rivals in love, but they both hoped that Hong Zhuang could live well. Therefore Mo Yunjue would definitely help. As long as Mo Yunjue inquired about the location of Hong Zhuang's parents, he would immediately send people to act. He would definitely rescue Hong Zhuang's parents as soon as possible. After seeing Di Beichen so certain, Yu Linfeng's eyebrows were tinged with a trace of surprise, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Generally speaking, Shirtian Tower would not accept a mission that involved a lot of things, unless the other party gave them conditions that they could not refuse. Otherwise, they would not be willing to do something that might offend the Yu clan. As a medical family, the Yu clan was really a family full of disciples. In the entire Xingqian continent, there were many cultivators who had received their kindness. However, the Yu clan was not a medical family. They only treated people for benefits. As long as they could not pay enough benefits, even if a cultivator died in front of their door, they would not blink. Since Shirtian Tower will accept this mission, I believe that they will definitely find out the specific location. Yu Linfeng's eyes flashed with wisdom. He was also very impressed with Shirtian Tower's information network. There was almost no news in the entire Xingqian continent that they could not find out. As long as they determined the location, they could take action. Di Beichen nodded slightly. I will do it as soon as possible. If you need my help, just tell me. Bailey girl is my disciple. Although we have not been master and disciple for long, she is a junior that I think highly of. Since you're together with Bailey girl, you have to treat her well, Yu Linfeng said earnestly. Bailey Hongzhuang's background was too pitiful. He only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang would be happy in the future. Feeling the connection and lamentation in Yu Linfeng's words, Di Beichen's heart was also touched. No matter who it was, they would feel pity for Hong Zhuang after learning about her past. Hong Zhuang was such a good girl, yet such a thing happened to Hong Zhuang. He could only hope that everything would get better in the future. Palace Master, you don't worry. I will definitely treat Hong Zhuang well. Di Beichen's handsome face flashed with a serious light, and his words were like an oath. After talking with Yu Linfeng for a while, Di Beichen walked out of the assembly hall. Outside the assembly hall, Bailey Hongzhuang, He Mu, and the three beasties were waiting outside. Gu Taihong was also looking at them with a kind smile. They did not know what Yu Linfeng was talking about with Di Beichen in the assembly hall, so they could only wait here. He Mu did not know what the young master and young madam were doing here. He was completely confused. After the three beasties arrived at Limitless Palace, they became well behaved. Playing around on normal days was nothing. Now that they came out with their master, their actions represented their master. Naturally, they could not lose face for their master. Chapter 1697. Gu Taihong's gaze landed on Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Baisher. These three contracted beasts were very special. Until now, he had never seen such contracted beasts before. Aside from the different colors, the two black and white furballs were exactly the same, as if they were twin beasts. Moreover, that pair of eyes were full of liveliness and liveliness. Compared to the other contracted beast he usually saw, it was undoubtedly much livelier. It was as if its intelligence was higher as well. The other white contracted beast looked very cute. Its round body was lazy and cozy, but its pair of lively big eyes revealed a bit of sharpness. These three little fellows looked like they had no battle strength, but he noticed that the strength of these three contracted beasts was not simple. With Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's status, their contracted beasts were naturally not simple beasts. Gu Taihong's gaze wandered between the three contracted beasts for a moment, then his gaze landed on Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Since Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were a pair of lovers, then it was very likely that their contracted beasts were similar. This black and white furball was obviously very suitable for Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Hearing Gu Taihong's words, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "They are all my contracted beasts." Master had already prepared to nurture her as the successor of Limitless Palace. As Master's most trusted elder, she could naturally trust Elder Gu. Even if she didn't say it now, Gu Taihong would find out sooner or later, so there was no need to hide it. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Gu Taihong couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. His eyes suddenly widened, and he suspected that he had heard wrongly. These 3 beasts are all yours? Even though Gu Taihong was sure that he didn't hear wrongly, he still couldn't believe this answer. Everyone could only have 1 contracted beast. How could Bailey Hongzhuang have 3 contracted beasts? This was simply too inconceivable. When He Mu saw Gu Taihong's incredulous expression, a faint smile appeared on his face. When he first found out that young madam had contracted 3 demon beasts, his expression wasn't much better than Gu Taihong's. Young master had always been outstanding since he was young, but every time young madam did something, it would always give people an indescribable feeling of shock. In the eyes of ordinary people, some things that were impossible to happen often happened to young madam. Now that he had seen so many things, he was already puzzled. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. That's right. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang affirm the answer, Gu Taihong couldn't help but ask, You? How did you do it? Every cultivator could only form a contract with 1 demonic beast. This was a law that had been passed down in the Xingqian continent for many years. It wasn't that no one had tried to contract 2 demonic beasts. After all, contracting 1 more demonic beast would increase the strength of the cultivator. However, none of the cultivators who tried this had a good ending. After witnessing such a situation, no cultivator in the Xingqian continent dared to attempt such a thing. However, he actually saw a successful case. This was simply too unbelievable. Chapter 1698. The reason why Bailey Hongzhuang was able to contract 3 monsters was because of the existence of the Chaos Ring. If it weren't for the Chaos Ring, she would naturally only be able to form a contract with 1 demonic beast. However, she could not say this reason. After thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang could only make up a reason and attribute everything to her own uniqueness. After all, she had no way to make other cultivators do this. I don't know what's going on at this point, maybe it's because of my special characteristics. At the beginning, I accidentally contracted the 2nd monster, and later found that there was no effect, so I contracted the 3rd monster. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was a bit confused. She then asked, Elder Gu, do you know the reason? After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's answer, Gu Taihong was a little puzzled, but soon felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's answer was true. Because he had never heard of a cultivator in the Xingqian continent who had successfully contracted multiple monsters. Bailey Hongzhuang's ignorant and blank expression did not seem to be faked. If this kind of thing happened to him, he would not know the reason. There were many things in this world that people could not explain. Perhaps, among the thousands of cultivators, there was a special case like Bailey Hongzhuang. This was not impossible. In the history of the Xingqian continent, there were many talented cultivators who could often do things that other cultivators could not do. However, when this kind of thing happened to Bailey Hongzhuang, Gu Taihong's mood was still a bit complicated. In the process of investigating Bailey Hongzhuang's past, Gu Taihong was refreshed by Bailey Hongzhuang again and again. Doctor, alchemist, inscription master, cultivator, Bailey Hongzhuang had 4 identities, and her development in these 4 aspects was extremely outstanding. Dr. Bailey Hongzhuang was a very famous doctor in the Fengbo country. Alchemist, Bailey Hongzhuang won the 1st place in the 3 Academy tournament. Inscription master, Bailey Hongzhuang was highly sought after by the Qing dynasty's inscription masters. Cultivator, Bailey Hongzhuang won the 1st place in the assessment tournament. If it was any other young person, as long as they had one of these 4 identities, it would be an extremely happy thing. However, Bailey Hongzhuang directly took all these professions, and her achievements in each profession were excellent. As an elder of Wuji Palace, he had seen many young cultivators, but he really did not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang had so much energy to accomplish all this. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang had successfully contracted 3 more demonic beasts. This was truly infuriating. Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments were a bit too amazing. However, Gu Taihong was very sympathetic to Bailey Hongzhuang's tragic life. Any achievements were not obtained for free, but relied on the continuous efforts of the cultivator to succeed. Thinking about it, it was because of her miserable life that Bailey Hongzhuang worked so hard. All these efforts would be rewarded. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would succeed in her revenge and rescue her parents. I've never heard of a cultivator being able to contract with 3 demonic beasts. Miss Bailey has really opened my eyes. Gu Taihong laughed. Chapter 1699. Following the conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and Gu Taihong, not long after, Di Beichen walked out of the conference hall. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Di Beichen's face revealed a smile. Beichen. Bailey Hongzhuang called out softly and walked to the front of Di Beichen. Di Beichen smiled and said, "Palace Master, you called you in. He has something to tell you." Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She did not expect that her master would call them in separately. "Then I'll go in." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and signaled to Gu Taihong before walking into the conference hall. When He Mu saw the young master and young madam walking into the conference hall, he was even more confused. What was the palace master of Limitless Palace trying to do? Conference hall. Master. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed respectfully to Yu Linfeng. "There's no one else here. You don't have to be so polite." Yu Linfeng waved his hand and smiled. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "Thank you, master. There's nothing important to call you here. I just want to tell you about the next arrangement. Master, please tell me. Have a good rest and relax in these 3 months. After 3 months, cultivate in Tiangang sect for 3 months. Lastly, come to Limitless Palace to cultivate with me for 3 months. I have already told young sect Master D about this. He will arrange it for you. Before you learn everything that I have taught you, I will not reveal your identity as the young palace master of Limitless Palace. You have to be careful too." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded seriously. "Thank you, master. I understand." With her current strength, she was indeed not qualified to assume the identity of Limitless Palace's young palace master. If she were to publicize this point now, not only would it not bring her any benefits, it might even cause others to question her master's judgment. The title of first place in the assessment was indeed not bad. However, compared to the title of Limitless Palace's young palace master, there was still a huge gap. "That's good. I believe you'll be fine." Yu Linfeng's eyes were filled with admiration. He admired Bailey Hongzhuang's strength and humility. However, any cultivator who could walk far on the path of cultivation all had the quality of humility. If they became arrogant because of a little achievement, they were destined to not have great achievements on this path. Bailey Hongzhuang deeply bowed to Yu Linfeng, her beautiful face full of sincerity and gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of me, master. I won't let you down." Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was filled with gratitude. From the beginning to the end, her master had trusted her and helped her. She was extremely grateful. In this world, there weren't many people who treated her well. However, for those who treated her well, she would do her best to treat them better. She had no way to repay her master's kindness. She could only make herself stronger and more outstanding. Only by doing so, she wouldn't let down her master's expectations. Looking at the expression in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, Yu Linfeng's lips curled up. "If you need my help, just tell me directly. I will do my best to help you." Yu Linfeng continued, "Since you're my disciple, you're not an outsider in the future. I don't have such thoughts. What's more, you know my arrangements in the ruins. Whoever passes will be my disciple. I can't determine who will pass. Appearance is one thing, it's just a coincidence." Bailey Hongzhuang stood in place and stared blankly at this scene. She already understood that this woman in red was her master's wife. However, she didn't expect her master to have such a side. It was really surprising. Chapter 1701. When she heard Yu Linfeng's words, the sobbing Nangong Wu froze for a moment. She thought carefully in her mind and realized that Yu Linfeng was right. No one would know who the cultivator who had received their inheritance was until the very last moment. As for the appearance, it was even more impossible to predict. However, from a woman's point of view, Bailey Hongzhuang was too threatening. She had always had high standards, but after meeting Bailey Hongzhuang, she felt that she was invulnerable, let alone a man. Then how dangerous would it be for me to find such a disciple? Nangong Wu looked at Yu Linfeng in dissatisfaction. She had thought that she was beautiful enough, but she never thought that she would have such a beautiful disciple. As a woman, she was a great threat. Seeing that Nangong Wu was getting off topic, Yu Linfeng felt even more helpless. He pulled Nangong Wu to sit next to him. Don't think too much. In fact, I should be Bailey's elder, an elder who is related to her by blood." Yu Linfeng's voice was gentle as he looked at Nangong Wu with eyes full of love and affection. He patiently explained to Nangong Wu. Bailey Hongzhuang stood on the spot and watched the scene. She felt that she should leave first under such circumstances. However, it would not be right for her to leave in such an awkward situation. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang could only stand awkwardly on the spot. She thought that her master would be able to solve this problem very quickly. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not expect her master, who had always been calm and collected, to be at a loss after seeing his wife. How interesting. If she had not seen this scene with her own eyes, she would never have imagined it. However, she was happy to see how close her master and his wife were. Although she did not know what her master had encountered in the Lan family in the past, she thought that it would not have been any better. Moreover, in order to not have any connection with the Lan family, master even took out the rainbow divine pearl. His master had endured so many things in the past, and now that he was able to find his own happiness, it was undoubtedly the happiest thing for him. After hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Nangong Wu also calmed down. She looked at Yu Linfeng in surprise, her expression full of confusion. Blood relationship? Nangong Wu's eyes wandered between Yu Linfeng and Bailey Hongzhuang. She could not believe what she had heard. You mean this girl is also from the Lan family? After understanding this point, Nangong Wu couldn't believe it. She knew very well just how much Yu Linfeng hated the Lan family. Normally, Yu Linfeng's face would darken whenever the Lan family was mentioned. Even when Limitless Palace was recruiting disciples, they would never recruit any cultivators who were related to the Lan family. From this, she could tell that Yu Linfeng hated the Lan family. However, Yu Linfeng actually found a cultivator from the Lan family to be his disciple? Wasn't this equivalent to giving Limitless Palace to the Lan family? How could Yu Linfeng make such a decision? Nangong Wu was completely stunned at this moment, but her clear and bright eyes were filled with a hint of seriousness. She wanted to know the answer. Yu Linfeng must have his reasons for doing this. Chapter 1702. After hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Nangong Wu also understood a bit. She looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bit of shock. She didn't think that when Yu Linfeng was recruiting disciples, there would be such a thing. Didn't this mean that Bailey Hongzhuang also suffered unfair treatment in the Lan family? Yu Linfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "Bailey Hongzhuang, do you mind?" Hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood what Yu Linfeng was asking her. "I don't mind." Since Nangong Wu was her master's wife, she would know about these things sooner or later. She didn't want her matter to become a grudge between her master and master's wife. She believed that after master's wife knew the reason, she wouldn't mind. Yu Linfeng nodded slightly. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, the affection in his eyes became stronger. Not only was this disciple of his amazing talent, but her character was also very good. Perhaps it was because of all these reasons he was even more determined to hand over Limitless Palace to Bailey Hongzhuang. The matter is like this. Yu Linfeng slowly told Nangong Wu about Bailey Hongzhuang's life. He was very clear that Nangong Wu had a childish temper. As long as Nangong Wu knew about Bailey Hongzhuang's life, he was afraid that Nangong Wu would treat Bailey Hongzhuang better. This woman, when she was angry, she was scarier than anyone else. However, her softness was equally shocking. With Yu Linfeng's explanation, Nangong Wu gradually understood. She never thought that Yu Linfeng and Bailey Hongzhuang had such a relationship. Bailey Hongzhuang's life was actually so pitiful. Nangong Wu couldn't help but feel heartache. Lan Jingquang's family is simply inhumane. After knowing everything, Nangong Wu immediately stood up. Her eyes were burning with anger again. The Lan family is really bad. After such a thing happened, they still stood on Lan Jingquang's side. It's really disappointing. Nangong Wu's face was filled with indignation. She couldn't believe that such a thing actually happened. The rainbow pearl was forcefully taken away, her parents were still imprisoned in the Yu clan. Bailey Hongzhuang completely didn't know about her life. She couldn't imagine how did Bailey Hongzhuang endure all this when she found out about her life's life. It came to think about it, this kind was a huge blow to anyone's life. Bailey Hongzhuang had started off as a cultivator of a small dynasty, and it really wasn't easy for her to reach her current position. At this moment, Nangong Wu didn't have any jealousy from before. Now, she only felt even more disgusted with the Lan family. Previously they had done such a terrible thing to Linfeng. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would do something even worse. It's not just the Lan family. That Yu clan is also despicable. Chapter 1703. Seeing Nangong Wu's murderous look, Bailey Hongzhuang was also dumbfounded. This mistress of his was really in a rush, just like how she was when she first walked in. Yu Linfeng quickly pulled Nangong Wu back and said, Things are not so simple now. Bailey's parents are still locked up in the Yu clan. If we act rashly now, once we are discovered, Bailey's parents will be in danger." After Yu Linfeng's reminder, Nangong Wu finally reacted and said, "Yes, I almost forgot about this most important thing. Then let's go save Hongzhuang's parents first." After we save them we will kill the Lan clan. The next moment, Nangong Wu walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang again and said, Hongzhuang, everything will be fine. If you have any problems look for me. As long as I can do it I will definitely help you. When you kill the Lan clan you must call me. I have been accumulating my resentment towards the Lan clan for a long time. After knowing all this, Nangong Wu no longer had any thoughts of jealousy. She only sympathized with Bailey Hongzhuang and hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang could rescue her parents as soon as possible. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was Yu Linfeng's junior, so there was no need to worry about this. Yu Linfeng's smile revealed a bit of helplessness. Nangong Wu had always been like this. He was also very helpless. However, it was precisely because of Nangong Wu's character that he liked her even more. Thank you, Master's wife. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with a joyful smile. Although today was the first time she met Master's wife and almost caused a jealous misunderstanding, she felt that with Nangong Wu's character, she should be easy to get along with. She believed in Master's eyesight. Don't be so polite. We will be a family in the future. Nangong Wu patted Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder and smiled warmly. Listening to Nangong Wu's words, Yu Linfeng was even more helpless. Someone just said that he was wrong. From the first time I saw you, I felt a sense of affinity. You are Linfeng's disciple, so you are my disciple. I will teach you everything I know. Nangong Wu was extremely excited. Yu Linfeng and her were the only two people in Limitless Palace. Although there were many disciples in the sect, they were not very close. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang was here, they would definitely have a lot of things to talk about. When she thought of this, Nangong Wu couldn't help but become excited. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Thank you, Master's wife. Yu Linfeng chuckled. Bailey lass, don't be fooled by Master's wife's impetuous personality. Her strength is still very strong. You will see it in the future. Moreover, she likes to create some strange things. I feel that the two of you should hit it off very well. Thinking about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as a doctor, an alchemist, and an inscription master, Yu Linfeng could conclude that Bailey Hongzhuang must also like to research some strange things. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. She always liked to fiddle with some special things. During the process of creation she always felt that it was full of fun. Really? Hongzhuang, you also like these? Nangong Wu said excitedly. Her pair of bright eyes looked at Hongzhuang as if she saw the most intimate person. Chapter 1704. I like to make weapons, explosives and the like. Nangong Wu's face was filled with an excited smile. She liked to deal with these things the most, but Yu Linfeng was not interested in these things. Therefore she usually studied these things by herself. The dark phoenix eyes were filled with deep surprise. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Nangong Wu in surprise. It was really hard to imagine that Master's wife would like to study these things. I haven't come into contact with these. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. So far, she had come into contact with things like medical skills and inscription techniques. She really had not come into contact with weapons and explosives. Hearing this, Nangong Wu was a little disappointed. She just wanted to find someone who was interested in these things like herself. It seemed that it was really too difficult. However, I am very interested. The delicate and dazzling face was filled with a gentle smile. Although she had never come into contact with these things, she was also very interested in these things, especially explosives. With Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Nangong Wu's face quickly filled with a touch of joy. Really? Nangong Wu asked uncertainly. She had liked these things for a long time, but the people she had come into contact with were not interested in these things. After all, most cultivators put their energy into cultivation. There were not many cultivators like her who did not do proper work. If there was a person who did not do proper work, it would be Bailey Hongzhuang who did not do proper work. She was obviously a cultivator, but she had dabbled in medical skills, alchemy and inscription techniques. However, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that there was nothing wrong with this. Really? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded seriously. She was full of interest in many things that she did not understand. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not seem to be lying, Nangong Wu's eyes became more and more excited. That's really great. I will have a companion in the future. Nangong Wu was excited. When the time comes, we'll make a powerful explosive and throw it into the Lan family. The effect will be great. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. She had to admit that what Mime said was a very good suggestion. When he went to take revenge he would throw a few explosives. The effect would definitely be great. When Yu Linfeng saw the excited Nangong Wu and Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him, the smile in his eyes deepened. It seemed that he had made the right choice in accepting this disciple. After a burst of joy, Nangong remembered something and said, "When I came in just now, I seem to have seen the young master of Tiangang's sect, Di Beichen. Why is he here?" The dignified young sect master suddenly paid a visit to Limitless Palace. This should be a very big matter, but until now why didn't she receive any news about it? Yu Linfeng smiled. Young sect master D and Bailey Lass are a couple. Young sect master D specially came to accompany Bailey Lass. After the conversation with Di Beichen previously, his impression of Di Beichen was very good. He believed in his judgment. If there were no accidents, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang would walk to the end. Hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Nangong was slightly stunned. Her gaze then fell onto Bailey Hongzhuang. Really? She heard from Linfeng that Bailey Hongzhuang came from a small empire. Since she was from a small empire, how did she know the young master of Tiangang's sect? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled, tacitly agreeing with Nangong Wu's question. Chapter 1705. Bailey Hongzhuang was very clear that those cultivators who knew of her relationship with Di Beichen were all in disbelief. Many people felt that she and Di Beichen would not be able to walk to the end, but she was full of confidence towards this relationship. Only, Nangong Wu's reaction was still beyond Bailey Hongzhuang's expectations. Nangong Wu directly gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. Beautifully done. I didn't like that Han something from the start. Han something? Nangong Wu couldn't help but look towards Yu Linfeng, but she couldn't remember this name. Han Shiling. Yu Linfeng smiled helplessly. Yes, Han Shiling. Nangong Wu nodded. I didn't like Han Shiling from the first time I saw him, acting all high and mighty as if he was very impressive. How could he be as pretty as our Hongzhuang? Totally incomparable. Nangong Wu couldn't help but hold on to Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, her smile filled with delight. At that time I already said that if young sect master D was only together with Han Shiling, then he must be blind. Now it seems that not only is young sect master D not blind, his taste is very good. Previously I already thought that young sect master D was not bad. He's handsome, young and promising, and there aren't many like him in the entire younger generation. Hongzhuang, you must hold on to him well. Nangong Wu smiled and winked at Bailey Hongzhuang, then pointed to Yu Linfeng behind her, just like me. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh. This master's wife of hers was simply too interesting. But, master is so outstanding, master's wife has indeed grabbed hold of a good man, huh? I'm telling you the truth. Although there are many men in this world, there aren't many who are the best. Nangong Wu looked serious. She liked Bailey Hongzhuang more and more now. She was beautiful, discerning, strong and interested in explosives. They were simply too congenial. Seeing that Nangong Wu's words were getting more and more ridiculous, Yu Linfeng couldn't help but walk forward and say, your teacher's wife is like this. You'll get used to it. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at her sensible master and her senseless master's wife. She suddenly felt that these two people were really an excellent pair. It was precisely because their personalities were so different that it would be faster when they were together. Outside the council hall, Di Beichen frowned when he saw Nangong Wu rushing in. Looking at this posture, Nangong Wu seemed to have some ill intentions. He had seen Nangong Wu before. In fact, it was hard to forget a woman like Nangong Wu after seeing her once. That was because her personality was too unique. As everyone knew, Limitless Palace Master Yu Linfeng's wife was a flamboyant, impulsive and fearless woman. She didn't care about her reputation at all. She didn't care about any problems. Everything was out of her consideration. She only cared about her own happiness and unhappiness. It was said that she had once heard a sect leader bad-mouthing her. She immediately rushed up to argue with him. She did not hesitate to curse, not caring about her own identity. On the contrary, that sect master lost all his face. After this incident, everyone rarely went to offend Nangong Wu. Nangong Wu didn't care, but they did. Suddenly being pointed at their nose and scolded, no one could stand it. Chapter 1706. It was said that at that time the sect master stood there and was scolded by Nangong Wu for a long time, but he didn't say anything back. After all, as the sect master, it was impossible for him to scold others. Naturally, he didn't have the ability to scold others. What's more, even if Nangong Wu didn't care about his face, he couldn't possibly scold her without caring about his face. As a result, almost no one dared to offend Nangong Wu. No one would be able to stand being scolded like this. If it was an ordinary person, they could just kill them. However, Nangong Wu was the wife of Limitless Palace's palace master. Who would dare to kill her? Once it involved the sect, it would be even more complicated. No one was willing to magnify the conflict. Therefore they could only suffer in silence. Not only that, everyone knew that Limitless Palace's palace master Yu Linfeng doted on his wife very much. He wouldn't blame Nangong Wu at all. Therefore, in the world of sects there was a weirdo like Nangong Wu. No one could control her. Hong Zhuang found Yu Linfeng as her master. This Nangong Wu was also a problem. Di Beichen couldn't help but worry. If Nangong Wu liked Hong Zhuang, it would be great. With Nangong Wu's protective personality, Hong Zhuang wouldn't need to worry about Nangong Wu in Limitless Palace. However, if Nangong Wu didn't like Hong Zhuang, then the situation would be terrible. After all, with Nangong Wu's position in Limitless Palace and the degree of doting between Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu, Hong Zhuang would be at a disadvantage. No one could say for sure about Nangong Wu's personality. She might have an inexplicable affinity or she might not like her. Thinking of this, Di Beichen couldn't help but worry. He only hoped that the worst situation wouldn't happen. If he really didn't get along with Nangong Wu, he wouldn't let Hong Zhuang suffer. After all, everyone knew that Yu Linfeng doted on Nangong Wu. Di Beichen loved Bailey Hong Zhuang was also a fact. Just when Di Beichen was thinking, Bailey Hong Zhuang, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu came out together. After seeing the smiles on the faces of the three people, the worry in Di Beichen's heart was put down. It seemed that it was not as bad as he thought. Hong Zhuang, go back to Tiangang sect now. Remember to come back when the time is up. I still have a lot of things to say. Nangong Wu smiled at Bailey Hong Zhuang. She felt that to her, Bailey Hong Zhuang was like a younger sister and a daughter. She really liked her. When Bailey Hong Zhuang came to Limitless Palace, she wouldn't be so bored. If it wasn't for the fact that Hong Zhuang could be together with Di Beichen, she really wanted to leave Hong Zhuang in Limitless Palace now. Hearing this, Bailey Hong Zhuang smiled and nodded. I will definitely come on time. Although it was the first time she met Nangong Wu, she liked Nangong Wu's character. No matter what, she wouldn't hide anything. It was easy to get along with her. She believed that she and Master's wife would get along well in the future. Young sect Master Di. Nangong Wu's gaze fell on Di Beichen. Her eyes were filled with admiration. Now that I see it, young sect Master Di and Hong Zhuang are really a good match. In the future, Limitless Palace and Tiangang sect can get closer and interact more. Di Beichen cupped his hands. Thank you for your praise. If there's an opportunity, I will definitely interact more. Nangong Wu looked at Di Beichen with satisfaction. Among the younger generation, I like you the most. Chapter 1707. As if realizing the ambiguity in her words, Nangong Wu continued, I'm relieved that Hong Zhuang is with you. I hope you two can continue to love each other. Following Nangong Wu's words, everyone's expression returned to normal. Palace mistress, don't worry. I will take good care of Hong Zhuang. Di Beichen's face was brimming with a handsome smile. His Hong Zhuang was really capable. They had only met once and she was able to get along so well with Nangong Wu. At this moment, Nangong Wu's expression was completely different from when she first walked in. This change wasn't ordinary. He Mu stood at the side in a daze. He didn't understand what was going on. Why would the palace mistress of Limitless Palace be so intimate with young mistress? Looking at this situation, it was as if young mistress had a close relationship with them. However, according to the information he had gathered, he didn't know that young mistress was involved with Limitless Palace. Could it be that his information wasn't accurate? He Mu's expression changed again and again. What was going on? He really couldn't understand. He originally thought that they came to Limitless Palace because the young lord had something to do. Now, it seemed that they came here because of young mistress. Compared to He Mu's confusion, the three beasties were undoubtedly very happy. When their master accepted the inheritance, they didn't know the specific situation. Although they later found out that Yu Linfeng intended to make their master the young palace mistress of Limitless Palace, they still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Now, it seemed that this situation was already set in stone. Their master was indeed capable. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to do this. Thinking of this, the three beasties couldn't help but jump for joy. In this way they would have another helping hand when dealing with the Lan family. That Lan Qingyan can be arrogant in the Lan family now. She snatched Master's rainbow pearl and even occupied Master's position as the Lan family's patriarch. She thought that she could trample Master like this. And now, Master is also the young palace mistress of Limitless Palace. Master isn't any worse than her. Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with anger. Soon they would find the Lan family. Let Lan Qingyan be arrogant for a while. Not long after, they would make Lan Qingyan unable to be arrogant anymore. Everything that happened in the past must be returned to Lan Qingyan's family. Since they used despicable means to step on Master's parents to obtain today's glory, then they should have a taste of falling to the bottom of the valley. Xiao Bai's eyes were gloomy. When it thought about how those fellows still had a clear conscience after causing such harm to Master's family, it gritted its teeth and wanted those fellows to pay the price. Sooner or later. A ferocious glint flashed across Baisher's eyes. We have to work hard in our cultivation as well. When the time comes, we'll be able to get rid of one more person and feel a little better. As Baisher's voice fell, the three beasts' faces were filled with excitement. That day was not too far away. Lan Jingquang Yu Manlan Lan Qingyan, just you wait. Hong Zhuang, young palace mistress D, since you're already here, why don't you stay at our limitless palace for a few days? Nangong Wu asked with a smile. Hong Zhuang finally came, so she couldn't just leave like this. Hearing this, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other and said, "Many thanks for mistress's kindness, but we still have some things to do. This time we won't be staying here for long." Chapter 1708. Seeing that Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen had already discussed this matter, Nangong Wu also nodded her head. Right now, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen must be wholeheartedly focused on rescuing Lan Yunxiao and his wife. This was something that should be done. Alright then. Let's have a good gathering the next time we come. Nangong Wu said with a smile. Yu Linfeng also spoke up, if there's anything that we can help with, just let us know. No matter if it was the Lan family or the Yu family, they were both colossi. Dealing with them would definitely not be an easy matter. Even if Tiangang sect helped Hong Zhuang, it would still not be easy. Right now, Limitless Palace was also standing on Hong Zhuang's side. He also hoped to be able to help Hong Zhuang. Bailey Hong Zhuang bowed deeply towards Yu Linfeng. Many thanks, Master. Yu Linfeng waved his hand. No matter what, Master and Master's wife will stand on your side. Nangong Wu also nodded. Don't be afraid of them. Do what you need to do. Our limitless palace is not just for show. When Gu Taihong saw Nangong Wu's attitude towards Bailey Hong Zhuang, he was even more surprised. Everyone knew that it was not easy for the palace mistress to have a good impression of a woman. Previously, when he saw the palace mistress aggressively entering the discussion hall, he was still a little worried. He never thought that Bailey Hong Zhuang would be so capable. Not only did she not make the palace mistress dislike her, she even made the palace mistress like her so much. This was really not easy. Thinking up to here, Gu Taihong felt some admiration for Bailey Hong Zhuang. However, although he had only seen Bailey Hong Zhuang twice, he also liked Bailey Hong Zhuang very much. It would be hard for people to have a bad impression of such a beautiful and powerful woman. What's more, Bailey Hong Zhuang was so humble and courteous, and she worked so hard on her cultivation. It was hard not to like her. After confirming that the palace mistress also liked Bailey Hong Zhuang, Gu Taihong had already determined that Bailey Hong Zhuang would be the future young palace mistress. For the past few days, the palace master had been looking for a successor. This way, when the palace master wasn't around, the young palace master could step in. Although the main reason was that the palace master's wife wanted to take the palace master to travel the world. Obviously, with the personality of the palace mistress, once she went out, she would not be able to return for a while. If he did not agree, the palace mistress would definitely be extremely displeased. Under such circumstances, the palace master set aside his determination to find a successor. Now that he had found a successor that the palace master and his wife were so satisfied with, it seemed that there wouldn't be any problems. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen intended to leave after bidding farewell to Yu Linfeng and Di Beichen. However, they did not expect Nangong Wu to insist on sending them out. Therefore, in the eyes of the Limitless Palace's cultivators, they saw an extremely shocking scene. They actually saw the palace mistress and Bailey Hong Zhuang chatting happily. All along, in the hearts of all the Limitless Palace's disciples, there was a person that they absolutely could not provoke, Nangong Wu. As long as they offended the palace mistress, they would definitely be extremely unlucky. Therefore, they did not dare to have any interactions with the palace mistress. Moreover, they had never seen the palace mistress getting along well with anyone else. However, now they actually saw the palace mistress and this woman having such a good relationship. Chapter 1709. Oh my God, who is this woman? She actually has such a good relationship with the palace master's wife. It seems that her identity is definitely not simple. I thought that the main person who came here this time was the young sect master of Tiangang's sect. Fairy, it seems that this woman is the main person who came here. The disciples of Limitless Palace looked at this scene in a daze. Even in Limitless Palace, they rarely saw the Palace Master and Palace Master's wife. Now the Palace Master and Palace Master's wife actually came here to send Di Baichen and Luo Pin off. This was already an incredible thing in their eyes. Everyone was confused. They didn't know who this Bailey Hongzhuang was. It could be said that they were extremely curious. Master's wife, we will leave first. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed and said. Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu both nodded and said, be careful on the road. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen smiled slightly, then turned and left Limitless Palace. He Mu and the three beasts followed behind. From the beginning to the end he was still confused. Why did they come to Limitless Palace? Chapter 17:10. Looking at Di Baichen's curious look, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly and said, Master's wife is a very interesting person. When she first walked into the conference hall, she gave me a fright. I can see that Master and Master's wife have a very good relationship. Previously, Master's wife almost treated me as a love rival. Fortunately, Master explained it. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. She had never thought of such a misunderstanding before. Although Master's wife wasn't young, her temperament was completely like a child's, which was very cute. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Baichen also revealed a look of realization. He was wondering why Nangong Wu had an aggressive look when she entered the conference hall. It turned out that this was the case. However, Nangong Wu's thinking was really strange. Di Baichen looked carefully at Hongzhuang. After thinking carefully, he felt that Nangong Wu's worry wasn't unreasonable. Yu Linfeng was originally a handsome and confident man. Even though he wasn't young because of his strong cultivation, he looked extremely young. The life of a cultivator was originally longer than that of an ordinary person. In addition, Hongzhuang was as beautiful as a flower. It was normal for Nangong Wu to be worried. Palace Master's wife is also a famous beauty in the sect world. However, my wife is so beautiful. It's not strange for Palace Master's wife to be worried. Di Baichen held Bailey Hongzhuang with one hand, his face filled with a proud smile. Seeing Di Baichen's glib tongue, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh. You're talking nonsense. Di Baichen straightened his face. I'm telling the truth. Who wouldn't say that my wife is beautiful? As he spoke, Di Baichen looked at the three beasties and said, do you think I'm right? Yes. Master is the prettiest. The three beasties immediately exclaimed. They didn't say that just to cooperate with Di Baichen. Di Baichen was telling the truth. So far they had seen so many cultivators, but the most beautiful one was their master. No one could compare to their master. Seeing the three beasts and Di Baichen singing the same tune, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. She immediately held Di Baichen's arm and said, I'm very happy that you all are praising me. A woman would doll herself up for her lover. Naturally, she hoped that she was the most beautiful in Di Baichen's eyes. Now that she heard Di Baichen's praise, she was in a very good mood. A bright and moving smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's exquisite face. The evening's red glow sprinkled on Bailey Hongzhuang's body, making her face even more beautiful and charming. The corners of her eyes and the tips of her eyebrows were filled with joy. When Di Baichen saw Bailey Hongzhuang like this, he couldn't help but be a little infatuated. That fresh and refined smile was deeply imprinted in his heart. To him, there was no woman in this world who could be compared to his wife. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Di Baichen staring at her without moving, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. Baichen, what's wrong with you? Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's question, Di Baichen came back to his senses and said with a smile, my wife is too beautiful. Bailey Hongzhuang's charming face flushed red, but the curve of her lips couldn't help but rise. She never cared about how others saw her. She only cared about how the people she cared about saw her. My wife, it's beyond my expectations that you can get along so well with the palace mistress. Chapter 17:11. Listening to Di Baichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Baichen with slight astonishment and said, why? I feel that Master's wife is easy to get along with. Some people think so, but many people don't think so. Di Baichen chuckled. He had a certain understanding of Nangong Wu's character. This kind of person often got along well with people who had affinity with each other. Once they didn't have affinity with each other, it would be useless no matter how much you tried to curry favor with them. However, as long as Hongzhuang could get along well with Nangong Wu, it would only be better in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen. After noticing Di Beichen's eyes, she immediately understood. She immediately chuckled and said, I understand what you mean. Master's wife's character is simple. She doesn't care about anything else. If there's anything she wants to say, she will say it directly. This kind of temper can easily offend people. However, if you get along with her sincerely, it's really good. A cultivator's life was full of twists and turns. There were countless scheming people. In her previous life, when she was the head of an aristocratic family, she had seen a lot of such things. In order to obtain cultivation resources, in order to achieve better results, even if they were cultivators from the same family, the methods they used were still terrifying. Perhaps it was because everyone's thoughts were too deep. That's why Master's wife's straightforward character was disliked. However, as far as she was concerned, the type of person she liked the most was someone who was as sincere as her master's wife. Getting along with her was very simple. There was no need to worry too much. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood his meaning, Di Beichen's eyes flashed with a touch of appreciation. My wife is really smart. You immediately understood your husband's meaning. Bailey Hongzhuang proudly raised her eyebrows. That's natural. You're right. With Palace Master's wife's character, if you get along well, it's naturally excellent. Originally, I was very worried that you and Palace Master's wife wouldn't get along well. After going to Limitless Palace, there might be problems. Now, it seems that I don't need to worry anymore. After confirming this, Di Beichen was in a good mood. What he was most worried about was that Hongzhuang would be bullied. Even if he could become the young palace master of Limitless Palace, he would not allow Hongzhuang to be bullied. Sensing the concern in Di Beichen's words, the tenderness in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes deepened. Di Beichen had always been very good to her. She knew this very well. Bailey Hongzhuang held Di Beichen's hand, a happy smile lingering on her beautiful face. Don't worry, I can handle these things. Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly and said with a smile, Wife, this is the first time you've taken the initiative to hold my hand. Ever since he got together with Hongzhuang, he had always been the one taking the initiative. In comparison, Hongzhuang was almost always in a passive state. However, today Hongzhuang actually took the initiative to hold his hand. This was a big improvement. Looking at Di Beichen's astonished look, Bailey Hongzhuang paused for a second, then blinked and said, There will be many times in the future. Yes, there will be many opportunities in the future. They will always be together. He Mu and the three beasties followed behind Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang. Looking at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's happy appearance, they couldn't help but smile. Chapter 17:12. After Bailey Hongzhuang left Limitless Palace, she set off for Tiangang's sect. Now, they still needed to go back to Tiangang's sect to verify one thing. Not only that, they also needed to go back to Tiangang's sect to wait for news from Shirtian Pavilion. No matter which one it was very important. Only by confirming these things one step earlier could they save Hongzhuang's parents as soon as possible. As long as this matter was not resolved, their hearts would not be able to relax for a day. On this day, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were walking on the road. He Mu and the three beasties were still far away. Although they had been on the road these days, it was still a very beautiful day for Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Because in the past they were always on the move for all kinds of things and often couldn't be together. Now, the two of them could see each other every day, which was already the happiest thing. After thinking for a long time, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that she was getting closer and closer to talking about Boss Gang. She was afraid that some things needed to be said. She hoped that there was enough trust between her and Di Beichen. No matter what, they could face it together, and she didn't want to have any estrangement. Wife, do you have something to tell me? Di Beichen noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang was absent-minded and couldn't help but ask. He had always known his wife's character. Today he keenly felt that his wife's mood was a little strange, so he immediately asked. Listening to Di Beichen's inquiry, Bailey Hongzhuang paused slightly and said, Beichen, have you ever thought about Han Shiling? With Bailey Hongzhuang's voice falling, Di Beichen's deep eyes quietly flashed a touch of complicated light. Since she has already fallen in the assessment competition, then other things are no longer important. Di Beichen said slowly. Regarding the fall of Han Shiling, his feelings were extremely complicated. All along he had regarded Han Shiling as his sister. Naturally, he didn't want Han Shiling to fall into such a situation. However, since he and Hongzhuang were together, Han Shiling really caused a lot of trouble. If Han Shiling was still in the world, he was afraid that the trouble would not stop at all, and Hongzhuang would also encounter all kinds of dangers. Now that the matter had been settled, he simply did not think about it. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw that Di Beichen was unwilling to mention this matter, she nodded her head. When I reach Tiangang sect, I believe that the Great Elder will definitely ask me about this matter. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was gentle. She believed that even if she didn't say it, Di Beichen would definitely know the origin of all this. Therefore, she didn't need to continue to explain this matter to Di Beichen. She just needed to understand Di Beichen's attitude on how to deal with the Great Elder. The fall of Han Xiling has nothing to do with you. No matter how the Great Elder questions, there is no meaning. Di Beichen's voice was calm and firm. He had also expected this. He had always known how much the Great Elder doted on Han Xiling. He believed that the Great Elder would definitely not be able to accept it after knowing this matter. Once he brought Hongzhuang back to Tiangang sect, the Great Elder would definitely come to question and even find trouble. However, the Great Elder's arrangement of Han Xiling to enter the competition was already a very excessive move. The Great Elder couldn't get away from the fact that things had developed to this point. Chapter 17:13. Earlier, when his master was investigating the matter, he had already investigated this point. Even if he had already thought that Shi Ling would definitely find trouble with Hongzhuang when she participated in the assessment competition, he did not expect that Great Elder would actually participate in it. Not only that, Great Elder even bribed Wuxia and the others, intending to let Hongzhuang and the others be completely wiped out in the assessment competition. It was precisely because of this that he was worried to the extreme during the assessment competition for the past 2 years. He was only worried that something would happen to Hongzhuang. In the past 2 years he had rarely interacted with the Great Elder. In the past, he never thought that the Elder who had watched him grow up would have such an unbearable scene. It was really unbelievable. All of this was Great Elder's own fault, he could not blame anyone else. For the sake of Hongzhuang's safe return, he had already suppressed the anger in his heart a lot. If Great Elder still dared to find trouble, then he would not be polite. Seeing that Di Beichen directly confirmed the answer with one sentence, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and said, "Okay." From Di Beichen's words, she already understood Di Beichen's answer. It seemed that their thoughts were the same. Di Beichen turned his head and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, his handsome face was full of seriousness. "Wifey, you know, I have never been willing to let you suffer any grievances," Di Beichen said slowly. Great Elder has been in Tiangang sect for many years, his status can be said to be deeply rooted. It will take some time to solve this. He would not let Great Elder bully Hongzhuang like this. No matter who it was, no one could bully Hongzhuang. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was warm. It did not matter how others treated her, as long as Di Beichen treated her well, it was enough. With Great Elder's status in Tiangang sect, if you rashly take action against Great Elder, I am afraid that it will cause doubts among the disciples of the sect, which will have a certain impact on you. Since I went to Tiangang sect has had a lot of fluctuations. If the Great Elder leaves because of me again, I'm afraid that the entire Tiangang sect's cultivators will not have a good impression of me. Han Xiling has already fallen, and the Great Elder has already been punished. As long as the Great Elder doesn't do anything excessive, this matter will be settled. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flashed with wisdom and rationality. She had already figured this out long ago. The Great Elder of any sect had a lot of influence in the sect. If he acted rashly, it was very likely that it would cause some problems. Although no one had any evidence to prove that she had killed Han Xiling, she knew that many cultivators would think that she had done it. Ever since she appeared, Han Xiling had already fallen. She believed that this fact had already shocked many cultivators. If the Great Elder was dealt with after Han Xiling's death, she was afraid that in everyone's eyes, she was already an extremely difficult person to get along with. What's more, Han Xiling and Di Beichen had a very good relationship before. Because of her appearance, Di Beichen did this. In everyone's eyes, there was no doubt that Di Beichen was an ungrateful person. She loved Di Beichen so much, how could she be willing to let Di Beichen bear such infamy? Since the Great Elder had already been punished, as long as the Great Elder did not do anything excessive, she felt that everything would not have a big impact. Chapter 17:14. Wife, even if it will be a little troublesome to deal with this matter, I won't let the people who bullied you go unpunished. The handsome eyes as deep as the sea were filled with cold light. The Great Elder's action this time was too much. Now Hongzhuang had to stay in Tiangang sect to cultivate. If the Great Elder was so narrow-minded, he was afraid that more trouble would be inevitable. Therefore he would gradually take away the power that belonged to the Great Elder. After all, he needed a reason to deal with the Great Elder directly. The disappearance of Wu Yuexin and others was now a dead man telling no tales, so he could only use other methods. It would take some time, but the result would not change. Bailey Hongzhuang held Di Beichen's hand tightly, and her bright eyes were filled with gentleness and tenderness. She understood that Di Beichen had already made a plan in his heart. This man's means of dealing with things was always admirable. Since he already had a plan, why should she worry? Originally, she was a little worried about how Di Beichen would view the death of Han Xiling. Now it seemed that she didn't need to care. Di Beichen had already seen through everything. She was afraid that she would be worried, so he didn't say much. Now that the obstacles between the two had been overcome one by one, she believed that they would be smoother in the future. After rushing for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen finally arrived at Tiangang sect. Coming to Tiangang sect again, Bailey Hongzhuang's mood had changed compared to 2 years ago. When she first came to Tiangang sect, her heart was uneasy. She was worried that her appearance would bring trouble to Di Beichen. She was worried that she and Di Beichen would be hindered. However, when she went to Tiangang sect, this series of things did happen. Fortunately, Di Beichen had solved them one by one. This time, when she returned to Tiangang sect, the only problem was to fight with Elder Han Hongyi. However, Han Hongyi's strength alone was obviously not enough. Therefore, there was no need for her to worry. At this moment, in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind, the idea that was constantly hovering in her mind was the matter of blood identification with the sect master. After arriving at Tiangang sect, she would presumably carry out the blood identification. It would be best to confirm this matter as soon as possible. If they weren't related by blood, Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't have thought much about it. However, if she was really related by blood to the sect master, then all of this would undoubtedly be a huge conspiracy arranged by the Yu clan. Bailey Hongzhuang felt a chill in her heart when she thought of the depth of this conspiracy. Yu Xiqing was simply too terrifying. Perhaps in Yu Xiqing's eyes, Yu Manlan was just a chess piece. Her real motive wasn't to help Yu Manlan, but to destroy Mu Lingbing's happiness. If that was really the case, then this woman's viciousness was simply shocking. It was already very vicious to destroy the relationship between the sect master and Mu Jint's. She didn't succeed in her attempt to ascend to the top. After that, she continued to retaliate. This woman simply put everything into hatred. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen appeared in front of the disciples of Tiangang sect, the crowd couldn't help but burst into a burst of exclamations. Gazes of amazement and shock fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, the name of Bailey Hongzhuang was known by everyone in Tiangang sect. Chapter 17:15. Bailey Hongzhuang is actually here. Great Elder must be furious now. That may not be the case. Even if Great Elder is resentful, no one knows what is going on. I think that the reason why Han Xiling participated in the assessment competition was to kill Bailey Hongzhuang, but she failed and was killed instead. Although we didn't see it with our own eyes, I think that this matter is most likely related to Bailey Hongzhuang. So what? Han Xiling is already dead. A dead person doesn't have any meaning. I think this Bailey Hongzhuang is really amazing. She is obviously a cultivator from a small empire, but she can actually become the champion of the assessment competition. This can be considered the biggest dark horse in the assessment competition for so many years. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang herself, but even her friends have also achieved very good results. This really isn't an ordinary thing. Han Xiling has occupied the position of big senior sister in Tiangang sect for so many years. I didn't expect that she would be replaced by Bailey Hongzhuang in such a short time. The affairs of the world are really unpredictable. After seeing the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang, everyone was filled with emotion. Han Xiling was so arrogant in Tiangang sect that it was as if no one among the women could be on par with her. Although she had always been sought after outside of Tiangang sect, to the disciples of Tiangang sect, she was too arrogant. She usually looked down on everything and was even more disdainful of them. Therefore, in the eyes of many male cultivators, Han Xiling was a goddess-like existence. However, to the women, such a Han Xiling was obviously not what they liked. However, Han Xiling had stayed in Tiangang sect for so long after all. They didn't expect that she would fall like this. It was really beyond their expectations. Now, they had a faint feeling in their hearts that Bailey Hongzhuang was probably going to replace Han Xiling as an extraordinary existence in Tiangang sect. As for Bailey Hongzhuang, most people were unfamiliar with her. They had never interacted with Bailey Hongzhuang before, so they naturally didn't know what kind of person she was. However, based on their current situation, they only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't a simple person. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that everyone's eyes were filled with nervousness and vigilance. She couldn't help but feel a little helpless. She didn't want everyone to be afraid of her, but it wasn't strange that the things that had happened before had led to such a result. To improve this, she had to rely on her future actions in Tiangang sect to gradually improve all of this. She believed that misunderstandings were just misunderstandings, and it wouldn't take long for them to be completely cleared up. Young master. As Di Beichen appeared, all the cultivators present bowed to him. Di Beichen nodded slightly, and then walked into Tiangang sect with Bailey Hongzhuang. He believed that his master must be waiting for them to come back. At the end of the assessment competition, he planned to take Hongzhuang back to Tiangang sect to confirm this matter. However, because of the proposal of Xia Jiqing and others, they first went back to Kanglin College and then went to Wuji Palace. They didn't return to Tiangang sect until now. Although his master had never shown it, with his understanding of his master, he knew that his master must be very concerned about this matter. Chapter 17-16. For a long time, Master had always thought that he was alone. At that time, because of Yu Xiqing's obstruction, he had such a big misunderstanding with Master's wife and regretted it for life. After so many years, Master had never found Master's wife. Even if Master's will was firm, there was no news of Master's wife for so many years. The loss in his heart could be imagined. Perhaps, it would be impossible to see Master's wife again in this life. If Hongzhuang was really Master's granddaughter, then Master's heart could be rekindled with hope. At least he was not alone in this world. He had a daughter, a son-in-law, a granddaughter, and him. Di Beichen was also a little worried. After so many years, Master's heart finally rekindled with hope. If he was disappointed again, Master's heart would be very uncomfortable. However, this was something that had to be faced sooner or later. Only by confirming it earlier could they be more certain of the direction of the investigation. Bailey Hongzhuang followed Di Beichen all the way forward. She had already been to Tiangang sect before, but the main area of activity was Di Beichen's palace. Most of the other places were only visited once, and there were many places that she had never been to. Tiangang sect's range was very large. She was not a disciple of Tiangang sect before, so she could not walk around at will. After all, there was the existence of Han Shiling and Great Elder. If she acted rashly, they would definitely find trouble with her. Now Di Beichen took her to a place that she had never been to before. However, she believed that in the future she would also walk every inch of Tiangang sect and make it a place that she was familiar with. Although Bailey Hongzhuang had never been to this place, as long as she thought about it, she knew that Di Beichen must be taking her to see the sovereign. This was the most important thing at the moment. Heimu originally followed Di Beichen all the way forward, but halfway, Di Beichen let Heimu take the three beasts to wait for them in the palace. At present, only he, Master, and Hongzhuang knew about the blood test. Before everything was confirmed, it was better not to let others know about this news. If the result was confirmed, it would be fine. If not, it would be tantamount to making a mistake. He had nothing to do with Hongzhuang, but it was not appropriate to make such a thing as master. Therefore Di Beichen made such a decision. Hearing Di Beichen's instructions, Heimu immediately went to the palace. When the three beasts saw their master leave with Di Beichen, they couldn't help but curl their lips. They also wanted to know the result as soon as possible. However, since it was inconvenient to bring them along, then they would stay in the palace to wait for the result. Anyway, when they arrived at Tiangang Zone, there was Di Beichen by their master's side. They did not need to worry about their master being in danger. With Di Beichen's ability in Tiangang sect, no one could hurt their master. Heimu took the three beasts all the way back to Di Beichen's palace. Thinking back to those years, he almost stayed in Tiangang sect. However, since the young sect master's leg problem 5 years ago, he had been running around almost all the time. Now that he returned to Tiangang sect again, he missed the days outside very much. At that time, the days were also very carefree, but now that the three beasts were back, the days became a lot livelier. Chapter 17-17. Bailey Hongzhuang followed Di Beichen all the way forward. Finally, a bedroom appeared in front of her. This was already the rear of Tiangang sect. Usually no cultivators would come here at all, but the scenery was extremely elegant. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had never been here before, she could conclude that this was the bedroom of the sect master just by looking at the situation here. The sect master rarely appeared in front of the cultivators on normal days. As long as it was not a major event in the sect, he would not appear at all. For the cultivators in the sect master had always been a mysterious and powerful existence. Now that Tiangang sect already had Di Baichen as the young sect master, in order to support Di Baichen's identity, the sect master had almost handed over everything to Di Baichen to deal with, so the number of times he appeared was even less. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a faint smile. When she was in the Bailey family, the old guys in the family also liked to find these quiet and elegant places to live. "This is Master's bedroom," Di Baichen introduced aloud. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, and her eyes fell on the vicinity of the bedroom. The layout here was somewhat similar to Di Baichen's bedroom, but the sect master's bedroom was more stable, and Di Baichen's bedroom was more bright. "When I was young, I often stayed in Master's bedroom, and Master taught me cultivation here. It was not until I grew up that I went to my own bedroom. However, when Master was in Tiangang sect, I still often came over." His deep starry eyes were filled with nostalgia. Everything in the past seemed to be vivid in his mind, and now he had already grown up. This time really passed quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Baichen, who was reminiscing, and the smile on her lips could not help but spread a little. She had always understood that the sect master was both Di Baichen's master and family. In Di Baichen's childhood, the sect master was the most important existence. Therefore, Di Baichen had always respected and loved the sect master. Presumably, Di Baichen's feelings towards the blood test were extremely complicated. Bailey Hongzhuang held Di Baichen's hand tightly. Her delicate face was filled with a warm smile. "We'll know the answer soon. No matter what the answer is, it's always better to know it early." Hearing this, Di Baichen nodded slightly. However, compared to the two outcomes, he hoped more that Hongzhuang was his master's granddaughter. This was good news for both his master and Hongzhuang. He was the first to come up with this idea because these things could be completely linked together. Although he did not have enough evidence, he had a very strong premonition that this was the real result. After all, a coincidence could be a coincidence, but if too many coincidences were linked together, it would not be a coincidence but a man-made one. "Wife, no matter what the result is, you don't have to feel burdened. We're just here to confirm the result." Di Baichen's handsome face was once again filled with a smile as he comforted Bailey Hongzhuang. His feelings were very complicated, and presumably his wife's feelings should be very complicated too. They were all leaning towards the same result, and only hoped that they would not be disappointed. Ever since Han Hongyi found out about the news of Han Shiling's death, his mood had become extremely low. The greatest hope and sustenance of his life had disappeared just like that. He was really a white-haired man who had to send off his own son. Chapter 17-18. Even if he didn't have any evidence, he believed that Shi Ling's death must be related to Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could defeat Shi Ling with her strength. He thought that Bailey Hongzhuang must have used some underhanded means to make Shi Ling fall. When he thought of this, Han Hongyi's hatred for Bailey Hongzhuang continued to deepen. Since the appearance of this woman, Shi Ling's life had changed. Everything he originally planned was destroyed. Now Shi Ling had fallen. Even if he was still the great elder of Tiangang sect, what was the point? Once Bailey Hongzhuang became the mistress of Tiangang sect, then what was the use of his existence? He would never let Bailey Hongzhuang become the mistress of Tiangang sect so smoothly. Shi Ling fell to such a point he would definitely let Bailey Hongzhuang pay the price. Han Hongyi stayed in the house these days. The initial sadness and pain gradually turned into hatred and disgust for Bailey Hongzhuang. Since Shi Ling fell because of Bailey Hongzhuang, then he would let Bailey Hongzhuang be buried with Shi Ling. Only in this way he could go and see Shi Ling in the future. After all, if he didn't let Shi Ling participate in the assessment competition, then Shi Ling would not fall to such a point. He had regretted to the extreme. At the beginning he never thought that such a situation would happen. In his opinion, this was something that was set in stone. With Shi Ling's strength, it was undoubtedly easy to solve Bailey Hongzhuang. However, who would have thought that things would develop to this point? This was simply unreasonable. At the beginning he also understood the strength of Bailey Hongzhuang. Although her strength was not weak, with Shi Ling's strength and Wu Yuxian and others, they could definitely solve it. After thinking about all this, Han Hongyi's mind faintly had a guess. Perhaps Di Baichen had something to do with it. He did not believe that with the strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and her teammates, they could kill Shi Ling. Once Di Baichen was involved, then the situation would be different. As the young lord of Tiangang sect, Di Baichen always had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. What's more, it was not surprising that Di Baichen liked Bailey Hongzhuang so much. However, these were not the most important things for Han Hongyi. The most important thing was to let Bailey Hongzhuang accompany Han Xiling to the grave. In his eyes, Di Beichen was only bewitched by Bailey Hongzhuang's seductive methods. It wouldn't take long for him to see Bailey Hongzhuang's true colors. Just as Han Hongyi was thinking about how to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang, a voice came from outside the door. Great Elder, Bailey Hongzhuang is back. Tao Tsongrong stood outside Han Hongyi's door, her face full of anxiety. As early as before, Great Elder had already told her that once Bailey Hongzhuang came to Tiangang's sect, she should immediately come to inform him. She originally thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would come to Tiangang's sect again after 3 months. She did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to come back so early this time. Moreover, she came back with the young lord as if she was the young lord's wife. After learning about this, she immediately rushed over and informed the Great Elder of this matter. She grew up with Miss since she was a child. She did not expect that Miss would die because of Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 17-19. Han Hongyi, who was originally in low spirits, was instantly energized when he heard Tao Tsongrong's words. He immediately opened the door and saw Tao Tsongrong outside the house. When Tao Tsongrong saw Han Hongyi, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Usually, the first elder had a sage-like appearance. Just looking at him made people involuntarily respect him. However, the Great Elder in front of her did not have his usual sage-like appearance. After so many days of not tidying himself up, the Great Elder's face was covered with stubble and his eyes were sunken in. He did not have the slightest bit of energy. Seeing Han Hongyi in this state, Tao Tsongrong's heart was filled with emotions. Young lady's death had really dealt a huge blow to the Great Elder. You said that Bailey Hongzhuang is back? Han Hongyi's gaze suddenly focused and locked onto Tao Tsongrong. Sensing Han Hongyi's terrifying gaze, Tao Tsongrong could not help but feel a huge pressure. She immediately nodded and said, "She's back. Young sect master and Bailey Hongzhuang have just returned. Everyone has seen them." Tao Tsongrong replied. "Where are they going now?" Han Hongyi quickly asked. They went in the direction of the sect master's bedroom. Tao Tsongrong told Han Hongyi all the news she had learned. These days she had been paying attention to the movements of Tiangang Zone, so that when Bailey Hongzhuang came back she could be the first to find out. Therefore she was extremely sure of this news. "I understand." Han Hongyi left a sentence and closed the door, no longer paying attention to Tao Tsongrong who was outside the house. Tao Tsongrong did not find it strange when she saw the tightly shut door. She believed that since Bailey Hongzhuang had returned, then it was time for the Great Elder to take action. She only needed to wait for the final result. She believed that the Great Elder would definitely avenge young lady. When she thought of Bailey Hongzhuang and young sect master's carefree looks, she felt an indescribable anger. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen walked into Si Tuyen's bedroom, Si Tuyen already knew of their appearance and opened the door directly. "Come in." Hearing Si Tuyen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other and walked in together. "Master." Di Beichen bowed. "Greetings, sect master." Bailey Hongzhuang also bowed respectfully. Regardless of whether she was related to the sect master or not, the sect master had never objected to her relationship with Di Beichen. She was extremely grateful to the sect master for this. Looking at the perfect couple, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang, Si Tuyen nodded slightly, and his eyes were filled with admiration. When Di Beichen and Han Xiling stood together, he felt that something was missing. Even if the Great Elder tried his best to matchmake them, Han Xiling kept trying to please Di Beichen. But in his opinion, the situation was not right. Now that he saw Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang together, he felt that they were a real couple. This was because both of their eyes and brows revealed their sincerity. "You're back." Si Tuyen smiled faintly. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen nodded. Di Beichen then said, "We originally planned to come back after the assessment, but everyone suggested that we go back to the college, so we came back now." Chapter 17-20. He still remembered the first time he saw Bailey Hongzhuang. Si Tuyen felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and Jin Se looked very similar, especially the charm between their eyebrows. It was because of this that he lost his composure when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang for the first time. Because he still hadn't seen Mu Jin's for a long time, his mind was filled with Mu Jin's appearance. When Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, it really surprised him. At that time he felt that it was because Bailey Hongzhuang and Mu Jin's looked very similar that he couldn't help but have a good impression of her. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, it was as if he could vaguely see Jin say back then. Perhaps this was a kind of comfort that God gave him after seeing that he had searched for so many years without any results. After knowing that Bailey Hongzhuang came from a small empire, he gave up on this idea. With Mu Jin's situation back then, even if she wanted to go, it was impossible for her to go to a small empire. The world was big and there were all kinds of strange things. It wasn't impossible for people to look the same. Therefore at that time he didn't take this matter to heart. It wasn't until he talked to Di Beichen that they found the problem. All along he didn't pay too much attention to things that weren't confirmed, but this time he had a strong premonition that Bailey Hongzhuang was his granddaughter. This premonition was very strange. There was no evidence at all, but his mind seemed to have confirmed this matter. Little girl Bailey, your results in the assessment competition this time really surprised us. I didn't expect your strength to be so strong. It made many people's jaws drop and brought glory to our Tiangang sect. Si Tuyen's smile was filled with love and admiration. The first place of the assessment competition, such an outstanding cultivator had always been the target of their Tiangang sect's recruitment. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be able to get the first place of the assessment competition this time. This made Tiangang sect a little proud. Hearing Si Tuyen's praise, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into an exquisite and bright smile. Thank you for your praise, sect leader. It's all thanks to sect leader for giving me the opportunity to participate in the assessment. Si Tuyen waved his hand and said with a smile, "You're too humble. This is an opportunity that you fought for yourself." Tiangang sect only provided a platform in this matter. Bailey Hongzhuang could get the opportunity based on her own ability. Bailey Hongzhuang had won first place in the previous assessment. From the looks of it, Bailey Hongzhuang had already displayed her talent when she participated in the competition. It was just that in the competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had displayed her talent even better. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. From the beginning to the end, the sect master had given her a very good impression. After exchanging a few simple pleasantries, Si Tuyen cut to the chase. Bailey girl, Beichen should have already told you about it, right? Si Tuyen said slowly. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said, "Yes, I already know." "What do you think?" Si Tuyen's smile was warm and loving. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang as if he was looking at a junior that he thought highly of. To him, regardless of whether Bailey Hongzhuang was his granddaughter or not, Bailey Hongzhuang was his disciple's future wife. This would not change. Chapter 1721. Feeling Si Tuyen's kindness, Bailey Hongzhuang's originally nervous mood also relaxed. She raised her head and looked at Si Tuyen in front of her. Si Tuyen's appearance was already very handsome. Even though he had been through a lot, she could still feel his charm. At this moment, Si Tuyen's smile was very kind. The way he looked at her was as if he was looking at a junior that he liked very much. Looking at Si Tuyen like this, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart also felt warm. Through Si Tuyen's gaze, she could feel that Si Tuyen had really accepted her and Di Beichen. He did not feel the slightest bit of reluctance and accepted it from the bottom of his heart. If possible, I naturally hope that the sect master's guess is true. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. If she was really the sect master's granddaughter, then this was undoubtedly excellent news. This meant that she had found her first family in the Xingxian continent. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's calm appearance, Si Tuyen's smile widened. Among the younger generation of cultivators that he had seen, Bailey Hongzhuang was undoubtedly a very outstanding existence. She was talented, strong, humble and polite. When she did things there was a trace of calmness and a clear conscience. In Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes, he saw a fearless and determined heart. As a cultivator, such a firm belief was undoubtedly the most important thing. Back then, when he saw that Di Beichen had such a fearless martial heart, he felt very happy. Only with such a heart could a cultivator go further on the path of cultivation. Bailey Hongzhuang grew up in such an environment. That kind of adversity did not diminish her fighting spirit. Instead, it made her even more determined. This was not an ordinary kind of rare. In his opinion, very few people would dislike a young person like Bailey Hongzhuang. That was because she was simply too outstanding. I hope that you don't feel burdened. We're only doing this to verify a guess. No matter what the outcome is, there is no need to worry. Si Tuyen patted Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. His kind smile made her feel at ease. Regardless of whether Bailey Hongzhuang was his granddaughter or not, Bailey Hongzhuang was a junior that he greatly appreciated. Hearing Si Tuyen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. She turned her gaze and saw Di Beichen looking at her with a smile. Such a scene faintly made Bailey Hongzhuang have an illusion, as if they were a family, a very harmonious family. I understand. Bailey Hongzhuang replied. If you're ready, we'll begin. What do you think? Si Tuyin asked Bailey Hongzhuang. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would be greatly shocked when she found out about this. Thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang needed some time to adjust her mental state. He did not want Bailey Hongzhuang to feel pressured because of this. In fact, he was the one who asked Bailey Hongzhuang for help. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and replied, okay. The blood test was not complicated. When Di Beichen saw that Si Tuyin and Bailey Hongzhuang were about to start the blood test, he immediately walked out and prepared the tools for the blood test. Soon Di Beichen walked back again. In his hand was a black stone that was round and smooth. Chapter 1722. The love testing stone was a stone specially used in the Xingxian continent to test one's blood. Its results were extremely accurate. As long as the two people were relatives, their blood would fuse together after dripping on the love testing stone, and then it would transform into a rich technique. If they were not relatives, then there would be no reaction after dripping on it. There were many cultivators in the Xingxian continent, and the vast majority of them were mercenaries. Mercenaries usually walked in the demonic beast mountain range and often encountered danger. There were countless people who never looked back. Therefore, many children were displaced, and this love-testing stone was also an item that was often used. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the love-testing stone in front of her. 1,000 years had passed and this love-testing stone was still the same as before. Di Beichen placed the love-testing stone on the table, and his gaze immediately fell on Si Tuyin and Bailey Hongzhuang. Si Tuyin looked at the love-testing stone in front of him, and there was a trace of heaviness and slight nervousness in the depths of his eyes. Ever since he guessed this possibility, his mood was extremely complicated. Perhaps he was worried that the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. In the process of constantly searching over the years, he had always experienced the feeling of disappointment. After being disappointed too many times, he gradually became numb. Some mistakes once made would last a lifetime. Sometimes he was worried about hope. After having hope and then being disappointed, this was undoubtedly a more uncomfortable thing. I'll go first. Si Tuyin smiled kindly. His gentle and weathered face was full of calmness, and no other expression or fluctuations could be seen. In the next moment, Si Tuyin directly took out a dagger and gently cut it, and a drop of blood fell on the love-testing stone. Si Tuyin took a step back and sat on the side looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also took out a dagger and cut her finger, and a round drop of blood suddenly appeared on her finger. Then the blood dripped on the love-testing stone. As the 2 drops of blood fell on the love-testing stone, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became a bit more dignified. Si Tuyin, Di Beichen, and Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes all focused on the love-testing stone, waiting for the final result. The reaction process of the love-testing stone took some time, but the 3 people's eyes never moved. Because this result was really important to them. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at the 2 drops of blood on the love-testing stone. On the pitch-black love-testing stone, these 2 drops of blood were particularly obvious. Gradually, these 2 drops of blood were also changing the love-testing stone. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 were paying attention to this scene, suddenly, a sound came from outside the door. Sect leader, the Great Elder requests an audience. Si Tuyin's secret guard immediately appeared outside Si Tuyin's room and reported the situation to Si Tuyin. Hearing the secret guard's words, Si Tuyin couldn't help but frown. The current situation was not the time to be disturbed. Just by hearing Han Hongyi's name, he already knew the purpose of Han Hongyi's visit. Since Han Shiling's death, Han Hongyi had not come out after returning, and even some of the affairs in the sect were handed over to other elders. He did not say much about this. After all, Han Shiling's death was a great blow to Han Hongyi. Chapter 1723. Si Tuyin, Di Beichen, and Bailey Hongzhuang in the room immediately understood Han Hongyi's intention after hearing the report from the secret guard outside the door. Because, except for the possibility of denouncing, there was no other possibility at all. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was the same as usual. She had already guessed this. As long as she came to Tiangang's sect, Han Hongyi would come to trouble her sooner or later, but she didn't expect Han Hongyi to come so quickly. She just arrived at Tiangang's sect, and Han Hongyi had already found her immediately. Not only that, Han Hongyi knew that she was here with the sect master, but he still rushed here in such a hurry. Obviously he didn't care about anything else at all. He just wanted to avenge Han Shiling. Now that the sect master and Di Baichen were here, she didn't need to worry about this matter at all. She just needed to let the sect master and Di Baichen deal with it. After Di Baichen heard the report, his eyes also changed a few times. The Great Elder's speed was really fast. It seems that the Great Elder has been sending people to watch my movements these days. If not, the speed wouldn't be so fast. Let the Great Elder go back first, I have something to deal with now. Si Tian was obviously not in the mood to pay attention to Han Hongyi now. Now he put all his thoughts on this stone. This result was too important to him. How could he let others disturb him? Yes. After hearing Si Tian's instructions, she immediately responded and then left. With the departure of the secret guard, Bailey Hongzhuang and others' eyes fell on the stone again. Their thoughts were all involved in this and they just wanted to know the final result. Han Hongyi stood outside Si Tian's bedroom. After knowing the news of Bailey Hongzhuang's return, he quickly sorted it out and then immediately rushed over. At this moment, Han Hongyi had recovered his usual serious appearance. There was no previous loss and sadness, but there was a trace of fierceness and resentment in the depths of his eyes. Originally, he thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other disciples would arrive at Tiangang sect on the same day. At that time, it would be a little troublesome for him to confront her. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang was the first to return, he naturally had to act immediately. Since he knew that Xiling had fallen, he hadn't been able to rest well these days. As long as he closed his eyes, he would think of Xiling. As long as Hongzhuang was not punished, he would not be able to rest for a day. First Elder, the sect master is not free right now. Please go back first. The secret guard appeared in front of Han Hongyi and said expressionlessly. Han Hongyi, who was originally thinking about how to confront Bailey Hongzhuang, heard the secret guard's words and his face instantly turned ugly. How is this possible? There was nothing between the sovereign and Bailey Hongzhuang that he needed to understand, so how could he not have time now? In Han Hongyi's view, this was an excuse for the sovereign to protect Bailey Hongzhuang. He was very clear that a fallen cultivator had no meaning. Even if Xiling's status in Tiangang sect was unusual, but since the moment she fell, everything before had no meaning. However, now when this scene really happened in front of him, he still had an unspeakable pain. How could the sovereign be like this? Chapter 1724. Seeing Great Elder's stubborn look, the shadow guard could not help but frown and said, "The sect leader doesn't have time now. Great Elder, it's better for you to leave." Although it was the same meaning, the shadow guard's words carried a hint of warning. No one had ever dared to go against the sect leader's orders. Now that Great Elder had made such a request, wasn't he a little ignorant of his status? "I don't care about anything else, I want to see the sect leader now." Han Hongyi was stubborn. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang was now in the sect leader's bedroom, laughing at him. If he left just like that, how could he deal with Bailey Hongzhuang in the future? In the next moment, Han Hongyi rushed into the bedroom without a care. He must see Bailey Hongzhuang in front of the sect leader. Since Bailey Hongzhuang had made him experience the feeling of falling into hell, he would not let Bailey Hongzhuang have it easy either. Seeing that Han Hongyi intended to barge into the sect leader's bedroom, the shadow guard's face suddenly filled with a cold intent. As the sect master's secret guards, they usually stayed near the sleeping quarters. As long as they were around, no one would dare to act presumptuously. They did not expect that Great Elder, who was also one of the representatives of Tiangang sect, would be so rude today and dare to defy the sect leader's orders. "Great Elder, if you take another step forward, don't blame us for taking action." As the voice of this secret guard fell, almost at the same time, the other 3 secret guards appeared from the corner of the palace and stood in a row in front of the first elder. Whenever the sect leader did not want to be disturbed, they would not let anyone appear in front of the sect leader. This was their mission. No matter who it was, as long as they broke the rules, they would not hesitate to take action. The first elder's face instantly darkened when he saw the aggressive secret guard in front of him. He knew how powerful the sect leader's shadow guards were, but he did not expect that one day, these shadow guards would actually come to deal with him. "Go and report to the sect leader again. I want to see him now." Han Hongyi thought for a moment and resisted the urge to take action as he said to the shadow guards. Hearing this, the few secret guards looked at each other with complicated feelings. The Great Elder's status in Tiangang sect was not low, and today's situation was also for a reason. If he made a move like this, he was afraid that it would affect the relationship between the sect leader and the Great Elder. After thinking about this, a shadow guard said, "Then I'll go and pass the message again. If the result is still the same, Great Elder shouldn't persist." Han Hongyi looked at the secret guard with a complicated expression. He neither nodded nor shook his head. Only he knew in his heart that no matter what, he had to see the sovereign today. He wanted to know the truth from Bailey Hongzhuang's mouth. If he didn't do this, he wouldn't have the face to face Shi Ling. That secret guard immediately walked to the back. Today's matter was really troublesome. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others fixed their gazes on the love-testing stone. After a period of time, the love-testing stone gradually began to change. Soon they would be able to know the final result. The bright red blood beads slowly merged into the love-testing stone. The black stone was gradually dyed with a bright red color, revealing a bit of strangeness and mystery. Chapter 1725. The atmosphere in the room became more and more dignified. Even Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two wanted to make the atmosphere less tense, but at this critical moment they had to admit that they were nervous. The blood merged into the stone bit by bit. When the blood completely merged into the stone, it would be the time when the result would be revealed. The three gazes were focused and nervous. In another minute they would know the result. However, at this moment the secret guard's voice sounded again outside the door. "Sect Master, Great Elder asked to see you." His attitude was extremely stubborn. We stopped him but he didn't want to leave. The secret guard's mood was also very perturbed. Usually they would only carry out the sect master's orders and would not ask a second time. However, Great Elder's position in Tiangang sect was really different. After thinking about it again and again they decided to ask. Situ Yin put all his attention on the stone at this moment. Suddenly being disturbed again, his eyes became more and more serene. "Let him leave." The low and majestic voice was full of warning and determination. Situ Yan's words were unusually concise. Just from Situ Yan's words, everyone could already feel that Situ Yan was angry. Regardless of the importance of the current situation, Great Elder dared to question the sect master's order. This was already extremely disrespectful. After hearing Situ Yan's words, the secret guard outside the door couldn't help but shudder and regret in his heart. If he knew that the sect master had such an attitude, he wouldn't have asked the sect master a second time. They had followed the sect master for many years. Just by listening to the sect master's voice, they already understood the sect master's thoughts. At this moment, the sect master was already angry. They were afraid that after the sect master was done, they would also be punished. In the next moment, the secret guard quickly left. They had to let Great Elder go back quickly. With the departure of the secret guard, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. It seemed that Great Elder was really stubborn this time. He would rather defy the sect master's order to come and see them. From this action they could see Great Elder's attitude. However, the three people in the room didn't care too much about this matter. Their eyes fell on the stone again. As the blood was gradually absorbed by the love-testing stone, the entire stone turned black as if nothing had happened. Immediately after, a faint golden light gradually appeared on the love-testing stone. When the first golden light appeared, the minds of the three people present shook. Their eyes were fixed on the golden light, and they were filled with surprise and disbelief. After the golden light appeared, the golden light became brighter and brighter, and the entire stone turned into a dazzling golden color. After seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two couldn't help but look at each other, and in their minds they kept thinking about a sentence. Really? It's actually true. Bailey Hongzhuang and Situ. Even though they didn't have any evidence before after alienating themselves, they only felt that there were endless possibilities. Was Great Elder by? There was no need to doubt this point. Chapter 1726. Although Bailey Hongzhuang had already guessed this result, her heart was still filled with shock at this moment. The sect master was actually her grandfather. If it was before, this was something that she would never have thought of. The unfavored daughter of a small dynasty's general was actually the granddaughter of the dignified Tiangang sect's sect master. Once this news was spread out, who knew how many people would be stunned? Initially, she only thought that she had transmigrated into a useless young lady of a general's residence. Now, as she investigated her background bit by bit, she realized that her background was actually so amazing. Compared to before, this was simply a completely different life. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was filled with shock. So, her mother was the sect master and her grandmother's daughter. After Di Beichen confirmed this result, he was first pleasantly surprised. Later on he felt that this should be the arrangement of the heavens. Back then it was his master who brought him back to Tiangang's sect in swaddling clothes. Since then he had been living in Tiangang's sect. Later on his master went out to look for his master's wife, and he was forced to leave Tiangang's sect. He never thought that he would actually find his master's granddaughter after leaving. Was this not fate? If he did not go to Fengbo and fell in love with Hongzhuang, then he would not have seen the jade pendant on Hongzhuang's neck and would not have known of Hongzhuang's identity. In this way this secret might be buried forever. His master might not know that his daughter was suffering and his granddaughter was in Fengbo for the rest of his life. Among the three of them, Situ Yen was the most shocked. Previously, when Di Beichen told him about this possibility, he still felt that it was somewhat unbelievable. After all, this was something that he had never thought of before. For so many years he had always thought that he was alone. Perhaps the heavens wanted to punish him for the mistake he had made back then, so he could not find any trace of Jinsei after so many years of searching. He could only spend the rest of his life alone. The only thing that the heavens did for him was to let him find Di Beichen and inherit his mantle. Later on, until now, he realized that he was not alone at all. He had a daughter and a granddaughter. After Jinsei left, she gave birth to a daughter for him and gave her the name they had both chosen. Thinking of this, Situ Yan's heart trembled. Even though he had done so many wrong things in the past and hurt Jinsei to the core, Jinsei still named their daughter Ling Bing. However, after a brief moment of joy, Situ Yan's face turned even uglier. He was really an old fool. He had always prided himself on his intelligence. At such a young age, he was able to make a name for himself in the Xingxian continent. After taking over Tiangang sect for so long, Tiangang sect had become more and more powerful in his hands. However, the truth was that he had lived too muddle-headed his entire life. He should have known. If he had paid more attention back then, he would have known that Lan Yunxiao's wife was called Mu Lingbing. If he had confirmed this back then, things wouldn't have turned out like this. His daughter and granddaughter had suffered so much, but he didn't know about it until now. Thinking of this, Situ Yen was filled with regret. He let Jinsei down and didn't take good care of their daughter. Chapter 1727. Situ Yan's mind was filled with thoughts. Every time he thought of how Mu Lingbing had suffered all these years and how she had been imprisoned by the Yu family, Situ Yan's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Actually, Mu Lingbing had never done anything wrong. He was the one who had done wrong. However, his daughter's life had been ruined because of him. Now, he was certain that Yu Xiqing had done all of this on purpose. Yu Xiqing knew that Mu Lingbing was his and Jinsei's daughter. That was why she had been so ruthless towards Mu Lingbing and Bailey Hongzhuang. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. To Mu Lingbing and Bailey Hongzhuang, all of this was an undeserved calamity. Situ Yan's heart felt like it was being pierced by needles. His hatred towards Yu Xiqing had reached its peak. This woman was too despicable and sinister. Back then, it wasn't enough that she had separated him from Jinsei. Now, she had done such a thing to Mu Lingbing and Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't know how Yu Xiqing had tortured Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao all these years when they had been imprisoned in the Yu family. Or perhaps, the reason why he hadn't been able to find any trace of Jinsei all these years was because of Yu Xiqing. Thinking of this, Situ Yan's hands slowly clenched into fists under his sleeves. His veins bulged, showing how strong he was. If he didn't kill Yu Xiqing, he would never be able to vent the hatred in his heart. When Di Beichen saw that Situ Yan had sunk into a daze after seeing the changes in the love-testing stone, he couldn't help but call out, "Master?" Listening to Di Beichen's reminder, Situ Yan returned to his senses. His eyes, which had always been cold and hard, were now bloodshot. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, his eyes were full of complexity. Hongzhuang. Situ Yan changed the way he addressed Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, the way he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang was different from before. Hongzhuang was his relative, Situ Yan's granddaughter. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Situ Yan with a complicated expression. Situ Yan was actually her grandfather. However, she could not bring herself to call him that at this moment. After all, for so many years she had never had a grandfather in her life. Now that he had suddenly appeared, she couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Situ Yan's voice was dry and hoarse. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a complicated and guilty gaze. "Hongzhuang, grandfather has let you down." Situ Yan's eyes were filled with loneliness and guilt. All these years he had always boasted that he was magnanimous. Other than letting down Jinsei, he had never let down anyone else in the world. However, he never thought that Hong Zhuang would suffer for so many years because of him. The Rainbow Divine Pearl was forcefully taken away from her when she was still a baby, and she almost lost her life. Later on, she stubbornly survived, but her parents were not by her side. She had accidentally become the young miss of the general's mansion, but had been ridiculed as a good-for-nothing who couldn't cultivate since she was young and bullied by everyone. The source of all the suffering that Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered was because of him. Listening to Si Tuyen's words that were filled with guilt and complexity, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart softened. She only felt that Si Tuyen had aged a lot the moment he found out the truth. His bright black eyes were stained with thick vicissitudes of life. For someone like Si Tuyen to suddenly suffer such a big blow, his heart must be extremely complicated. Chapter 1728. Did she hate him? Bailey Hongzhuang did not hate him at all. That was because she knew that the man in front of her hated her to the core. It was not that Si Tuyen was unwilling to take responsibility. It was all because of a misunderstanding back then and Yu Siqing's despicable methods that led to the current situation. He had been kept in the dark. If he had known about all this, he would have taken action long ago. There was no need for anyone to blame him. Si Tuyen's heart was filled with regret. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt sympathy and heartache for Si Tuyen. None of this was what Si Tuyen wanted to see. Back then he should not have known a woman like Yu Siqing who was so unscrupulous. It was because of Yu Siqing's existence that Si Tuyen had regretted for most of his life. Now this guilt had surpassed all the regrets in the past. Perhaps even a hero like Si Tuyen would not be able to take it when he found out about all this. Grandfather, Bailey Hongzhuang paused for a moment before she called out to him. She did not dislike this form of address and it was not as difficult as she had thought it would be. This is not your fault. Bailey Hongzhuang could feel the deep sorrow that Si Tuyen was feeling from the bottom of his heart. She only hoped that Si Tuyen would not be immersed in this sorrow. This was because none of them wanted to see this happen. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's consolation did not have any effect. Si Tuyen was still depressed. It's my fault. It's all my fault. If it wasn't for my stupidity back then, how could so many things have happened? I've let you down, let your mother down, let your grandmother down. Si Tuyen felt that he had not let down any of the three most important women in his life. Grandfather, you didn't want this to happen either. Yu Siqing was the cause of all this. A fierce light flashed in Bailey Hongzhuang's pitch-black phoenix eyes. She hated Yu Siqing to the extreme. All the suffering that they were going through now was because of Yu Siqing. All these years, this perverted woman had simply taken pleasure in torturing them. She simply could not imagine just how perverted this woman was. Back then, because of Yu Siqing's interference, Grandma had already decided to leave. From that moment on, Grandma had already asked her to admit defeat. Even so, Yu Siqing wasn't willing to let it go. She began to lay her hands on her mother and her. Even if her grandmother and Yu Siqing fell in love with the same man, everything should have ended after her grandmother left. After all, Yu Siqing and her grandmother were good friends at that time. As a good friend, how could he be so heartless to do such a cruel thing? In Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, Yu Siqing could no longer be called a person. She was a poisonous snake. Seeing this, Di Beichen couldn't help but say, Master Hongzhuang is right. None of this is what you wanted to see. It's not your fault. All of this was deliberately arranged by Yu Siqing. She wants you to regret it for the rest of your life. Di Beichen felt that Yu Siqing wanted to ruin everything because she couldn't get what she wanted. Yu Siqing wanted his master to regret it for the rest of his life. Seeing his master in pain seemed to be the only way to lessen Yu Siqing's pain. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.